Hey, welcome everyone to the ARCHICAD User Monthly Training webinar with a special edition with my colleagues Andreas Lettner and Tim Ball, who just recently completed the Masters of ARCHICAD 2017 course together. So, hey Andreas, hey Tim, how are you doing?
Hi there, good to see you. Yeah, nice day here in England. Summer's here. Been to site with a smiling builder. I never know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
How's the weather in Austria, Andreas?
It's raining over here. I'm on the mountain lodge here. It's on 1,500 meters above ground. And if you want to look outside here, it's rainy, and you can look down to the valley and can see the clouds. So it's a bit chilly. It was hot here, but it's now it's getting a real alpine summer. A lot of rain.
Right. Well, I'm just going to show my screen for a moment to set the context. So this is the sixth of the monthly series of the ARCHICAD user website and program. Really delighted that every month we've been able to have an expert user share their work. Tim was actually the one that we kicked off the series with in January. Now, Andreas, today we're going to have a little chance to look at some of your projects personally, and then we'll be looking at the Masters of ARCHICAD 2017 course in terms of the highlights, things that we learned, things that we found the most interesting along the way. So just to set the context, let's make sure everybody can hear us okay and see right now just the screen with the Masters of ARCHICAD background and our webcams. Let us know where you're calling in from. And I see Eric Zerong, who's one of our very loyal, consistent attendees, members of the course. And it's in Australia, so it must be like 5 in the morning there. So awesome that you're up. And I know Rick Skorek, you're in Tokyo. You must be, is it 4 in the morning? It must be very early there. Yeah, 4 in the morning. Okay. And Dwight in Brantford, Ontario, Bob in North Carolina. Yeah, all right, everybody hearing it. Scott in Texas, Michael in Montreal. Hey, welcome, Michael. All right, so we have a good crowd here. So for those of you who haven't been on the ARCHICAD user series, generally focus on the work of one architect and look inside the projects. We're going to be doing that for a little bit with Andreas, but today is going to be a little bit different because we're combining it with the final presentation for the Masters of ARCHICAD series. And just to set the context for that, that started last July. It was an idea that came out of the Masters of ARCHICAD program that I've been running for the last several years with experts like Tim and Andreas sharing their expertise and their mastery. In this case, we took a project, a fairly complex hotel. I mean, not a huge project, but a pretty good size one. So what, 60 rooms was it, Andreas? 60 guest rooms plus facilities. Took it from concept on the site through development. We didn't end up actually creating a full set of working drawings like we sort of originally sketched out, but we did take certain parts of it all the way through to high level of detail and demonstrated along the way the best practices as far as we can see them for ARCHICAD 21. One of the things we're going to be talking about a tiny bit today will be ARCHICAD 22 because it's just coming out this month, and there are some, well, there's certainly improvements, some things that are going to change in what we can do, and you know, maybe the best ways to do certain things. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but mainly it'll be Andreas's work and then looking at the highlights of the program. For those of you who've been in the program this past year, if you have some specific questions that you'd say, oh, when you demonstrated site modeling, Andreas, that was interesting, but I didn't quite get how all that worked. We are allocating a little bit of time for some of those questions. I had sent an email to course members a few days ago, and we got some requests in, but feel free to type in to the chat box. Feel free to type in, of course, other comments as we go along, either for clarification or maybe if you say that something's particularly interesting. It's always fun to see the comments like, wow, that would have saved me time, or, I'm going to have to study that because that's useful. So that's enough beginning. Andreas, how about if we have you show your screen, and let's talk a little bit about your work. And Tim, we're going to get back to you in a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to make Andreas you presenter here.
Okay.
And so let's spend half an hour, 45 minutes, or some chunk of time looking at your practice and some of your projects on screen.
Good. What you see in the background, it's a residential building. This is one of the latest buildings we have realized, but I would say let's start from the beginning. Just to introduce myself, my name is Andreas Lettner. I was born in Zurich in Swiss, and I was studying in Innsbruck at the Leopold Franzens University, and did my thesis at the Institute of Hochbau and Entwerfen with Professor Josef Lackner. I was working in a couple of ateliers, and in the end I was working with Mansell Sandner Ridge, where I ended up these days as associate. And in the meantime, in between, co-founded Mars Architects in Innsbruck. And okay, so but what you see is that I mainly work in teams. Beside my architecture, I'm a passionate musician, like many architects. And beside the architecture, I also, by accident, came into urban planning projects for revitalizing smaller villages and smaller towns. Okay, and of course I'm these days teaching as a building information modeling specialist, and make seminars and lectures on different places. So I'm not bored at all. Okay.
And you also are helping firms implement ARCHICAD, like working on office standards and just workflow, right?
That's a fast-growing aspect of my work. It also happened to be honest, by accident, because here in Tyrol, the architects it's a pretty small family. We know each other here in Western Austria, and yeah, we collaborate, and so you start to help out your buddies, and it turns out that they are running bigger projects than you, and so in the end, you are a consultant, and yeah, I like that job, to be honest. So just to show you a few things what I've done, I'm not only working in Austria here in Western Austria, but it started with jobs like a feasibility study for mountain shelters in Oman, and it ends up with simple buildings in small towns here in Tyrol. Sometimes I make jokes. This is a nice pair of pictures. You see the left one, it's the preparation, and the right one is the result. That happened. I was out for dinner with a former professor of mine from the university, and he, as usual, was complaining, "Oh, you young architects, you forgot everything about architecture. You don't build models any longer." You know, he was complaining. And I went back to the office, and you can see my laptop at that time, and I was working on that building you have seen before. And I thought by myself, oh no, I don't like that attitude. And so I prepared me these little box, and I made with the help of Cinema 4D, I made very quick, I think in 10 minutes, this montage, and I was sending him this picture, the right one, obviously, and the answer was pretty quick, and he said, oh, sorry, I didn't know that you are still building models. So yeah, I'm happy to build models, and sometimes I'm dreaming, you know, sometimes I make things like a beautiful concept for a beach house, just dreaming around what you could do and playing with software. That always, building models always has been a passion of mine. So this is a little concept for a beach house. So it has got PVC container up there for collecting rainwater, and it has got little I call them cocoons for laying down, and the cocoons are hanging down on strings. So the idea was having these nice woven cocoons, where you can lay down and the wind is floating around, and you have got your own water, and you have got big curtains to close the side where the sun is coming in. Yeah, building models always helped. This is a little example of some work, how to revitalize simple things like what you could do to make places a bit better, you know. And I also did that. These montages are coming out not from by hand. All of them are drawn, in this case, with SketchUp, which has got a nice ability, they call it photo match, where you can make these instant photo montages. I also do concept for revitalizing shopping malls. That's one example from Bregenz. So I do the analysis, and I do that together or for a company. It's called CIMA. They are doing these studies, and they are giving me the quotes, and so we can deliver nice concepts how to revitalize empty buildings. And another thing is that one drove me over to urban planning aspects. That was a study for setting up, for connecting 3 shopping malls, and to find ways to make this area more suitable for people with bicycles and pedestrians. Another thing, for instance, is this is a house designed for a house in a village. They needed a few flats. They needed a little shop. They have lost everything. There is not even a gas station any longer in this village. There is, in former days, they had a pub, they had a shop, 2 or 3. They had a baker, they had a post office. These days they don't have anything. So we found out the place, and we designed a concept for a new village center, and it works very well. I do simple studies for site studies, and again, this is a photo montage. And that's one of the projects I really love, but it's on hold since 6 years now. Anyway,
so these, Andreas, these last 2 that are concept models, is a photo montage, obviously, but are those physical models, or are those rendered models?
This is rendered models coming from ARCHICAD.
So you're basically, you've got a rendering of this, something looking like it's a sort of physical tabletop model.
Exactly. Yeah. I always like to do that because people feel comfortable with that, and you can bring in these in this state. You have to bring some pictures, but they should be abstract, and you should create some fantasy going on in the minds of your contrahents, and in this case it worked very well. This is a hotel on a lake, on an existing marina, and so I made a concept for a hotel where each suite has got its own pier for a boat. So and they loved it, and they still want to do that. But let's see what's happening. This is a detail view, and you see sometimes I'm doing abstract things. I brought in this nice statuette from Giacometti, and yeah, and the idea was to create it to have a model. By the way, all those renderings are done with the Cinerender engine, which is part of ARCHICAD. And at that time, it was in 2012. It wasn't. At that time, I was using Cinema 4D for doing the renderings, and I still like it, the system, because it delivers you, for instance, this surface, it looks like it's wood. Don't you think it's wood? No, it's a procedural shader created in Cinema 4D. So
so we would be able to do something very similar directly in Cinerender and in ARCHICAD.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. With our surfaces, we have got exactly this ability. We can create out almost any surface out of nothing. We don't need textures, you know. We just have to have the idea how the surface has to look, and then we can create them out of the box with the so-called procedural shaders within the surface catalog. So this is, I would say, this is one of the most underestimated abilities what our render engine in ARCHICAD has. Okay, that's another thing. This is a smaller project. It's in the Emperor's Castle in Innsbruck. It's a small part of it, of course, and I was hired in 2011 by the Tyrolean Artist Association. They needed an additional gallery for contemporary art, and it was a bit tricky because it's completely protected. This is a heritage building, and you can imagine. My first question was, am I allowed to put a nail in the wall? And they said no. Okay, so I had to think about different concept, and here you see what it is. I was playing. It's like a band, a white band, going through these tiny rooms and leading you through. And then there's a second aspect. It's these black lines on the ceiling or beyond the ceiling, which are guiding you. That was a rendering here, and they are for real here. This is finished, but if there is time, I can show you a bit more pictures. All that, it was in 2010, 2011. It was completely 3D. It's completely BIM. Any element has got its properties, and so yeah. That's another project even earlier in 2007. That was a complete renovation for a British lady, and she wanted to have a renovation. She has got two flats actually, one on the third floor and one on the fourth floor, and we connected it completely. So we spent a lot of money to do the whole restructuring of these flats, but I thought it's pretty nice. And I was at that time also experimenting with the stairs, as you can see here. Here is the proposal, and here's reality. So it was a difficult situation because I wanted to block the way underneath the stair. So I decided to create a piece of furniture, which is very abstract, which follows the stair, and which is covers a bit the table here, because on the back side there's the wardrobe. So anyway, and you have to see also I was playing around with the colors. So there's a color system running through the whole flat. For instance, blue, of course, it's the bathroom. Okay, that's another thing. We are doing a lot of competitions. Unfortunately, on this one, we were second, as most of the time. But also here, there's not even one 2D line or anything. So anything is 3D. We tried to keep that from a very early time on. That's another proposal. This is a small cafe. So that's the way how we deliver our proposals. This is a bit later, 2014. This is not real. These are renderings, and all of those renderings are coming straight out from ARCHICAD. And each picture render time is about, with my computer, it's a MacBook, about, I wouldn't say 10 minutes. They're on 150 dp, and so it's pretty quick to get up pictures like that. Many people who see them think they are for real. Another thing, this is.
Well, I'll just point out, for those of you who may not be aware of it, Andreas taught a course in the Masters of ARCHICAD series on Cinerender. And so if that's something that you want to become more masterful in terms of creating renderings like that, check out that course. And if you can just email support@bobrow.com for more information about the Cinerender course that Andreas taught, and the recordings are, available for instant access. So
this is another example of a site study, urban planning. And what you see here, this is typically what we are doing. We are creating a slab or terrain, and we map the picture from Google Earth or from our GIS systems, from our government on. And so it looks like it's a table model, and then we create the surroundings, and then we set in a few proposals. That's it. So, and the background here, this is nothing else like an HDRI image, and I choose that one because it's very nice. It seems that there's a photographer behind taking pictures of the model, so it looks like it's really a model on a table in an office, So I like to play around with these symbolic. Of course, I'm doing jokes and playing around. Sometimes I want to have a glass of wine, so in this case I hadn't one, so made me a render. Anyway, so that's more or less the variety of things what we do. And now I want to show you of my practice a few examples what we have realized, and I go back in time. So this you already have seen. This is a residential building, completely done in ARCHICAD. It was first prize in a competition what we did. The nice thing was, or the interesting thing was, the whole building was intended to be a hotel. But later on, the investor decided, oh no, I don't need a hotel here. And then it was going up and down for about 4 years. And in the end, it turned out, oh, we need student flats, okay? And so we had to redesign the complete hotel without changing the form at all. So that was the challenge. So what you see is we have got a really small atrium inside. So the entrance and the staircase is in the inside, and from the street you just walk in. The inside is completely covered with a vertical structure of a wooden structure. It's like a grid. We have done that at that time with the curtain wall tool, which is one thing we always loved to use, but we always hated it in a way because we thought by ourselves, oh my God, such a nice tool, but it seems to be half-baked. But good news is in ARCHICAD 22, the whole curtain wall was absolutely renovated, and it looks great, to be honest. Anyway, so you see,
Andreas, before you move forward, there was a question posted earlier. I think it was related to this project, because he said, that's a fantastic building you showed. How does the glass in the windows get to be bent to the angle?
You think that one here?
Yeah,
that's tricky. I've done that with curtain wall. Yeah. This is actually, this I have done in ARCHICAD with it's two windows actually. It's that one and it's that one. And to be honest, it's also down here, that one, and it's that one. I realized those one in the in the ARCHICAD drawing, not with a window. I realized them with curtain wall. So it's again, I've realized the inside, the grid, the whole the vertical structure, the wooden structure, and you can see, you can guess here inside, and I've used the curtain wall tool for creating those windows, which are absolutely not regular. And the only thing you have to do is you have to classify them as a window, and then they show up in your listing as windows, and that's nice.
So while I've interrupted the flow just a little bit, one other question that came in from Eric Zerong. With the model, it looks like a wooden massing model. Are the walls, slabs, etc., all a single generic material with one Cinerender setting, or are they different materials each set to look like wood? Just wondering about when the project is more advanced, is it easier to change the materials or change each Cinerender setting?
To be honest, we always start with white color, gray color, blue color, yellow color, and then we replace them. The setup for the rendering I really make at the very last moment, because there is this function you can replace any material in ARCHICAD. I will show you later on with a setup which is coming up from an already prepared catalog, and it works more or less like in Atlantis. When you change one material, you change all which have the same material, and this is a very fast workflow, so there's no need to change the materials individually, the surfaces individually.
Right, but it sounds like you probably do have walls and floors set as different surfaces, so that then you can say all the walls that have this surface change it, or
exactly, that's it. We have the gray one, I would say, is the floor, the whitewash is the walls, and so we start like that, you know, and so we can change it. Yeah, very pragmatic. But there is, you never should forget, there is this search and select in ARCHICAD, which helps a lot these days. And yeah.
So Ian asked, can you rotate this building in 3D? Right now we're looking at just a slideshow, but you're going to be opening up some projects now momentarily.
Yeah, I will show you. This is not rendered. This is for real. Sorry. This is not a rendering, no. And you can see the whole building in the context. Yeah, that's how it's looking. Another project we have realized is the bus station in Innsbruck. It's beside the railway station, which is on the left side. And the bus station, to be honest, is underneath of this building. So that was also a competition what we won. And on top this structure, this is mainly an Ibis hotel. This is really a hotel. So this complex has got a hotel and some offices, that's it. And the nice thing is beyond the building, it's a bus station. And to keep the whole thing going, the whole structure is just in the middle. You can see it here. It's just in the middle. So the buses can drive underneath. And the whole building is not falling down just because of this staircase here. It's like a crutch, you know, keeping the building stable. So, but people, yeah, they call it the black cigar. So here, can you see it again? Another thing what we have done, and we're going back in time, it was in 2002 around. There was a railway station, and it was also, it doesn't look that much, you know, but it was a European-wide competition, and we won it, and we could realize it. The reason is this is in St. Anton. It's a famous winter sports area, and it's a very narrow valley, and the train is really the main connection within Austria. That means a lot of traffic is going on this railway day and night, and the effect is here in the valley that you have got all the time this noise coming from the trains. And so we decided to build our railway station more or less like a wall preventing the noise coming into the village, because here you can see the rail is going into a tunnel, and on the other side of the railway, the rail is coming out from a tunnel. So our railway station is more or less a noise protection, that's all. And the people loved it, and they love it until today, and it works perfectly. By the way, here you can see these buildings are for the skiers. This is the entrance to the Arlberg ski area. That was very, very nice. At that year, we won, I think, the prize for the nicest small railway station in Europe, so, or even worldwide, I don't know. But okay, and now let's go back very far, because I want to make a connection here. This is not a railway station, but this is a station on a highway in Austria, in the very, very western part. And we have done that very early. I think this was, oh my God, in 97 or 8, 1997 or 1998. And it was one of the first wooden structures combined with curtain walls. And to be honest, we have done that building with ARCHICAD 6.5 or 7, something like that. No, it was 6.5, yeah. And this is the keyword for me. I want to show you this file as a beginning. Actually, a file coming up from 1997. Wow. So let's try it. To be honest, I already have opened it up because I had to convert it. A file which is that old, coming from ARCHICAD, wouldn't open just with your actual version. So you have to do one intermediate step. You have to open it up with the version 10, then you can save it again, and then you can open it up. So let's do it. And yeah, it was 22nd of September and so on. Okay, of course, a few parts are missing, but if you look at the building, this is the construction plans, what we have got here. It is organized in, it's not that complex. It has got a basement, it has got a ground floor, and it has got a first floor. And there's a big restaurant in the ground floor. There is the kitchen areas in the ground floor. There's a bar area in the ground floor. And it's a very technical building, what you can see. There is a lot of ventilation, lighting, and all those pipes, what you need for supporting kitchen and bakery and preparation kitchen and yeah, the area for cooling products. It's here. It's show kitchen, and you see this is highly detailed. The question always was how to organize a building like that and how to organize the documentation like that. And even at that time, if you have a look back, we had the so-called quick views, if you remember. And we always used the quick views for organizing our documentation, which of course is back here. And how did we do that? Have a look here. For instance, we could save the zoom, and we could save the layer combination, and that was a lot, to be honest. So it was possible to have these zoomed areas, and it also was possible to save the zoomed areas, of course, with the layer combination here. And now you can change it. For instance, you can say, I want to see the whole construction planning with furniture, zack. So the furniture is here. Okay, or I want to see the whole thing with the MEP, zack. So the MEP is here. Of course, the MEP at that time, it was not three-dimensional at all. It was, of course, a linked DWG, or even worse, a linked DXF. But anyway, we used it and we implemented it completely here. And let me see, for instance, the tiling. So we even had the plans for the tiling, and we organized all of that with layer combinations and zoomed views stored in the so-called quick views. And the best thing is, let me see what happens if I go to 3D. Et voila, here we go. That was the quality how we have been working at that time in 3D.
By the way, what is your CPU? What computer are you running right now?
This is a MacBook Pro, what I'm running. It's the latest edition, and it's running smooth. But to be honest, when I remembered, it took a while to create that model in at that time with the computers. So, but I also can apply these days my 3D styles, and you see even that works. So it's pretty nice to work with a model which is more than 20 years old. And if you compare it to what we have done, let's go back to the pictures. I would say this is one-to-one. So I love that. And to be honest, I love that style.
So is this a curtain wall? Did we have the curtain wall tool then, or not?
No, it was not here. So that one are all individual windows and walls, and you see we faked it. We were working with objects, with columns, and in this case it's a steel profile what we have used. It's an object, and the glass, the glazing we did with walls. So we just used the layer which is 14A. It's the facade, the glass elements. So we used walls at that time. So but in the end it worked. If you look at let me have a look at the construction plan. Okay. Yeah, you can see all those elements here. That's it. It's walls and it's a few objects what we stuck together. So it was a bit complicated to model. So to be honest, modeling these days it's much more convenient. But in the end, it was possible to do it at that time, if you look at it. So that was the detailing what we could do. So you see, this is the so-called UP, and this is a GSM, and it's the one you have seen on the floor plan. You could identify it from the color. So we even could make an estimation, because we could make a listing of those elements, and we use them for our calculation. And that's nothing else like a wall, and it has got the 24 mils, and yeah, and it's out of glass, and it's on a certain layer. So that's it. It's a zone boundary. So could also use our zone stamps. So that was really, if I look at it these days, the modeling is really primitive, but it worked. So that's it. Okay, that is the oldest model. It's nice to see it's still working, isn't it? I love that. And I still could play around. The biggest problem at that time, of course, was getting in the terrain, and that was really tricky. We had to make that the whole thing. We did build it by hand, but it was so heavy. We had to do it in a separate file, and then we saved it as an object. So yeah, after having it as an object, it goes much faster. So here we go. Okay. one of the things I've mentioned, I always was collaborating when I was working. For instance, this project, it was a collaboration of Hans-Peter Fröhlich, Swiss architect, Stefan Knabel, my former partner from Mars Architects, Andreas Hausbacher, and me. And we even at that time did teamwork, because Hans-Peter was in Zurich. One of us always was at the office in Zurich, and all the time we had to collaborate. And so we very, very early started to work with teamwork. And I just want to show you another project, probably, which is a very nice story, because that story goes like that. Let me close that. Okay, we can move that away. I open the one in the background. No, that's wrong. Let me open that one. Okay, yeah. And when it's opening, it's a funicular. It's a cable car, a funicular. And the nice thing is, these funicular we did in 2010, 11. And the whole thing, there's a story behind, and I can show you. There we go. That was really one of the first BIM projects we have done. And I was invited to collaborate with a close friend of mine, Herbert Peter. He's in Vienna. He's an architect crack, and absolutely. And he and me, we were responsible for this model. And the whole model is not in Europe, it's in Baku, in Azerbaijan. Remember, there was this European Song Contest going on down there. And because of that, many new buildings have been built in the capital of Azerbaijan, in Baku. And one of them was the complete renovation of the old traditional funicular, connecting the place of the lower city with the upper place, and connecting the president's palace with the center of the city. And that was the result. It was a steel structure with glass, and on top of the old funicular. And okay, the initial design was in 2010. The project start was in 11, and the opening was 1 year later, not even. Project cost was about 5 million euros. A very close timetable, to be honest. The initial design comes from Walter Hoffellner and Herbert Peter. And what did we have? We did have 2 separate files on ARCHICAD 15 on our BIM server. And I was responsible for the lower station, Herbert Peter for the upper station, and so on. And in the end, we had also Rainer Seissow, which was in Baku. And it was Anton Müller who did the local communication in Baku, and it was a guy doing the local organization in Vienna. So yeah, there was an ARCHICAD BIM server. It was, the file size of the lower station was 735. The upper station was a bit bigger, almost double size. And the files include the complete project maps, all cross sections, all elevations, and the manual rebuild from model took 5 minutes at that time. That was the
Was that
workflow.
a rebuild? Was that a rebuild for a single view or for all views?
All
views.
All views, it was 5 minutes. So that was the collaboration map. The architects working in Vienna, in Innsbruck, and on site. We did it with ARCHICAD 15. We used Cinema 4D at that time. I will show you later why. And it was the file formats. The civil engineer did it with Rhino, even at that time, with Grasshopper. And the whole thing went straight to Müglitz, the CNC steel manufacturing. The steel work was done by GIG, an Austrian company. They were provided with 3DS and DWG. Yeah, and all that went together like that. We provided construction drawings like that on site. because it turned out that with regular 2D documentation, the builders down there were not able to do what we wanted and what we needed. So we ended up with drawings like that, showing them three-dimensional what to do and why to do what. So they were very happy. You see, we even showed them how to make a proper foundation, how deep and how thick and whatever. So that was, for instance, the structure. And this structure was programmed in Cinema 4D because as it was such a close timetable, we had to change those points all the time, because first problem was it turned out that the surveyor down there didn't do a proper job, so we had to lift this one and lower that one. And you can imagine what happens with a grid when you change one of those points. Any single point is going to change. And we knew from the beginning on that it's impossible to draw that by hand again and again and again and again. So we made we made a script in Cinema 4D, and when you change the whole thing, the whole net up there is reorganizing itself. It's pretty much like working with Grasshopper these days. And what you see here, for instance, is the packing list from the prefabricated elements, because all of them have been prefabricated in Germany or in Austria, and they have been packed on lorries, and they went down by car through Turkey and to Azerbaijan, and they have to be packed in a proper order. It's like here. And that's the construction plans for the Technic for the steel work. There again, and that's the assembling layout for the lower station, how to work, what step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on.
It's sort of like a little guide for building a toy project.
Exactly. And
or
the problem was,
or an IKEA cabinet or something. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the challenge here. And what you see, those beams came in one piece, and we placed them here just out of one reason, just to show them how much space they need in front to clear out, when the lorry comes, and what they need a space. And yeah, it was all these simple things, and that was concept for lighting, and that is the whole model in Cinema 4D. So you can see I've separated the knots and the pieces in between, and you can drag around this model and it's reorganizing itself. So that's the technique coming for the cable car. That was the rendering. With this little rendering, we won this little competition, and that was done in Atlantis. And that's the upper station. That's a study for lightning that was done in Cinema 4D. Different situations, light situations. Again, the upper station. And that's rendering, and that's for real. So I think it's not that far away. It's another perspective. And that was very, very nice to see assembling the whole elements coming in. And that's the whole thing by night. So yeah,
those skyscrapers, those tall buildings in the back, can you just go back to that view?
It's called the Flame Towers. They are very, very famous. This is on the main space up there in Baku. It's done by a Viennese company. They call it Flame Towers. And, yeah. So, and just to show you, this is the model. Let's go on. Here we go. Again, as you know, this is the construction drawings, and everything here again is organized through views. And we have got the whole maps for the design, for the building application, and for the building plans. And this is nothing new for you, I would say. But again, let's go to one of those. Everything is live here, or almost everything is live here in this case. And that's the model, and you can turn it around. Here we go.
So if you were to do that now, would you use Grasshopper?
Yeah, I would use Grasshopper definitely, because it's visual programming. This is the big difference to the regular scripting. What I can do in Grasshopper, it's programming or scripting for architects, because you drag around these little wires and connect them, and it's very logical. So it's really, I heard that probably you will offering a course for Grasshopper, and I would recommend anyone to do that. This is really fun to work with that. This is, yeah, easy.
Yeah, we might do a course this next year. Definitely have some interest in some one person who's volunteered to teach part or all of it. So
it's a lovely tool just for creating structures like those. I really
okay.
like that. Okay.
Let's see if there are any questions. I know you want to proceed on to another model, another project, but see if anyone has any questions before we go on, or just type it in as we move forward. You can go ahead and open up the next one. Everybody's pretty quiet. I think they're.
Oops. Sleepy. I'm too boring. Sorry. Okay.
Oh, it's sort of like these are things that are beyond what most people even attempt to do, and you're doing it masterfully. So it's quite something. Yeah, Michael from Montreal says jaw is dropping. So
okay.
And was German used throughout? Steve asks. Obviously, this was a project in Azerbaijan. They speak what is it, Russian, or what do they speak?
Yeah, have a look at the. That's a good question. I like that. Let's have a look to the floor plan. Of course they do, and so we had to provide all the documentation in 2 languages. So that's the fun. So we are not able to talk in Russian, and that was the reason why we had this third partner architect, Raisa, which was in Russia, and her job was she's able to talk in German and in Russian. She added all the Russian text on it. So that was one.
So by the way,
several
comments. Several comments. Definitely not boring. Very impressive. Very inspiring. And Lou says a far cry from replacement tract houses. He's working a lot on houses that were destroyed in a fire in our area, and that are being replaced. So very different.
Okay. So you see me playing around all the time here with the 3D styles. Yeah, I like them, to be honest. And this was one of the improvements what we have got in 21, and I really like them. And I'm always playing around with the shading, but I'm an architect, so most of the time I want to see my model very abstract. So I'm so happy for this white model with shadows, to be honest. And it started to make me think. And Eric, I think I move over to a little project I've prepared just to show how we organize these days our template and how we organize these days our projects, just to show you how easy it is to play with these things like renovation filter, like graphical override, like model view, like pen set, like structure view, like layer combination. And for that reason, I should open the file. Where is it? Yeah, here we go. I made me already a copy. Don't save. Okay. This is a project I've designed, I think 10 years ago, but I never sold it. The client at that time jumped away. But the nice thing is someone has seen it, and it seems that I've sold it. So probably we are going to build it next year. So anyway, it's nothing else like a small, tiny house. I've organized here everything. It's not a surprise for you. I've organized here the folders with view maps. For instance, there is one view map I call it always 00, so it shows up on top, and I call this is my view map for modeling and drafting. I have got in here cloned, so-called cloned folders. I assume you know what cloned folders are. You can prepare that one in your organizer, and in here you can clone folders coming from the project map. So you don't have set up the settings for each of your stories. You can say, regardless how many stories I have, I want to clone the stories and apply on them certain settings. So that's very easy. So we do it all the time. So that means I have created settings for modeling and drawing, which is a layer combination. I call it working. The scale in this case, I prepare, or we love to work 1 to 50. And
Which would be the
we want
equivalent of quarter-inch scale here in the US.
Oh, sorry, yeah. And we want to see the entire model. And then here is our second secret. We have got we work with different pen sets. There is a so-called basic pen set, and that is coming from the Austrian template. And within that pen set, I would say most of the standards of the Austrian standards are set in here. It's a very easy system. And that one we use, and we make a copy, and we make one for preliminary design, we make a copy, and we make one for the building application, and we make a copy, and we make it for the building plans. Okay, then you can set up, of course, the floor plan setting, then you have a graphic override, you have a standard for your dimensioning. Yeah, and what's very important in here, please ignore zoom and rotation when opening that view. I don't know if you like that. You know what that means? It means if you have this one here and you make a double click on here, it keeps like it is, you know. So, because otherwise, if you don't have that one, it drives you crazy, because all the time when you go back, bang, it zooms back to the entire view, and you don't like that when you are modeling, because when you are modeling, you want to see exactly the area, and you want to stay here regardless which story. So I can change the stories very quickly, and it stays like that, you know. By the way, for the stories, we always have an additional story on underneath the basement. We call it fundaments, downpipes, and terrain. And we have got one on top. We call it a site plan. So on top, if you look on top, you see just the roofs, that's it. And of course, you have your standard stories. If you look at the story settings, you will find a very interesting thing. The one beyond the basement has got the story height 0, and the one on top, it doesn't matter. And if you don't want to show them up in your section, you just have to remove the hook here. That's it. Okay. And
can you explain then, Andreas, what you put on that extra story at the bottom and what you put on the extra story at the top? Because putting a story at the top for the site plan is certainly not common. So it would be interesting to know what you put on there and how you use it.
The one down here is my container. You can see this is not only the site, which is here, this is the terrain, but it also contains the excavation and the refill. So it's very convenient to have an extra story to have access just to your site elements. Let's have a look here. It's down here. This is my site elements. So let me just go to this one, and let me go to that one. So we can see this is my site. The site is coming from the surveyor. It's like this. And what you can see here is a subtraction. And you can see this is you can give this information to the guy driving around and digging out everything, and that's what we do. So the whole thing here is going out directly to the builder, and the builder has got here a geolocated information. That's all what he needs, and that I save that one usually as an IFC file. Here we go, and then the builder can give this information to his system. Most of those guys have their caterpillars going with a GPS, and yeah, and they can dig out exactly what you want to dig out. So this case 3D.
So this is the site minus whatever has been excavated,
yeah.
And then
this
the
is the excavation.
Then the fill that goes underneath or around the building.
Yeah, let me show that.
Is that on the next story up?
No, that's on the same story. That's like this. Look at that. That's the refill. I show it in a graphic style and make it white so we can see it better. So that's the refill. That's it.
So you do a solid element in operation from the original site.
I'll show you in the section.
And then another solid element operation to create the fill.
Exactly. I can show you on the section. It takes a moment. Here we go. So you can see this is my live section. Here we go. That's my site, and I have subtracted this element. What you can see, this is a morph, and the morph is subtracted, and from this morph I do a second subtraction, which is the foundation, and so I get the basement. So this is very, very nice when you are changing the form of the building, when you do some small changes, because it's live, and that means that you always can find out the difference of the excavation. So
okay, so that's the extra story down. That's the extra story below the building plans themselves. And what do you put on the top story that is the site?
The top story is nothing else. We are obliged here in Austria, and I think almost everywhere, when we have a building application like this one, we have to provide a site plan. So that's the way how a building application looks here. It's red means this is new, and anything which is gray is existing, and yellow you have the demolition. And what you have to provide here is one top view, and on the top view the surveyor comes and is checking if the distance to the site limit, to the border, is okay, or if you are over it. And so, because we have here really strict regulations, and the site is very, very expensive. You pay here in, I would say, the average price for a square meter here in Tyrol is about, what I heard, 350 euros for 1 square meter. So the site is really expensive. In Innsbruck, it's going up to 3,000–4,000 euros for 1 square meter. And so the limitation is we have a limit, it's 4 meters minimum, and then it depends on the height of any of those corner points. And so this is the reason why we need this plan. It's the top view.
So the top view is that all 3D elements that are just displayed on that story, or are there any 2D things other than, say, dimensions or annotations?
The only 2D things what you will see is dimensions. This is work in progress. I have to finish this plan next week, so you will find a circle here, and you find a dimension here. The dimensions are the only thing which are two-dimensional. And
so the site mesh is set to show on all stories, but you just turn off that layer on the other plan.
It's even customized here. I love to do it customized, because I just want to see the outlines, all stories up, and the fill I don't want to see. just on the home story. And yeah, so it's really good, this option, because you can control exactly where you can see those elements. And the rest, if you see here, come on, this is a slab, this is a roof, the terrace is again a slab. Here one thing is missing, I'm not ready, but this is the staircase outside, this is the path, and this is the road in. Yeah, so all of them are three-dimensional, and this is very, very important, because we also make our calculation, our scheduling is coming out completely from the 3D elements. And okay, and of course I don't want to add a single line to my elevations, and I don't want to add a single line to my sections. So for all of those, I have created now, and I want to show that this is the view for modeling. As I told you, this is for modeling and drawing. And let's have a look to the same story for for the design. So that's the plans for the client. Just a double click on it and it looks completely different. You see, the walls are black because the client is not interested at all in any of those symbolic colors, if it's wood or concrete or whatever. The only thing what he wants to see is a clear plan, very, very easy to read. That's also a reason why you don't see here any dimensioning on the windows, and the exterior dimensions are really, really reduced to the absolute minimum, so he can get the feeling about how big his building is. That's it. And if we go back, let me say, to the building application, the same story with a double click, zack, you see it completely different. This is the way how the authorities want to see the plan. You see, you can see here they want to see the width of the door. It's 80 up to 205, but the builder is not interested at all in that one. The builder wants to see, builder sees, okay, that's the space, and on the dimensioning later on, the builder will see a different thing. The builder will see the size of the hole, what he has to create in the wall, because that's the thing what he's interested, you know. So that's, for instance, the builder's plan. And we go even further. I show you in the 3D. I think that's the best thing. Let me see 3Ds. Okay. That's one thing I really like, and that came up with version 21. Let's remove this grid. If you look at this picture, it's a graphic like we architects like, you know. Certain things are looking like the trees, very abstract. It's nothing else like a drawn thing. And if you look closely down here, a guy is running around. But I don't want to see the guy with a fancy material. I just want to see him as a line. The same thing is the car. The car is just symbolic here for me or some people. I want the people to focus on the building, and I want to focus them on the really important things, like that we have a vertical cladding down here, or that this rail is very, very simple, or that those are black, and down here on the bottom I want to have it whitewash. And if you turn around, you can see same here. I want to have the whole terrain should go into the back, and the trees I want to have them like hand-drawn trees and not some realistic. And that's one thing what you can achieve with 21 really, really easy. The only thing what you have to create here, you have to carefully set up your model view, and you have to carefully make a graphic override. And the graphic override in this case looks like that. I want to see the terrain, I call it descent in gray. And if you look at the rule, I'm looking for all types which are on the layer terrain. And those one I want to have with a descent foreground pen, and I want to have a whitewash surface. That's all. So if I apply this rule anything which lands on the layer terrain will become gray like that, you know. And then I have a layer, it's called staffage, the same thing here. And in this case, the surface for staffage is invisible. And so guess on which layers those guys are. And the car, it's staffage, you know. If I put them on a different layer, they immediately...
What is the meaning of that, the layer name staffage?
Staffage is something nice. You would use it if you make a picture. It's an eye catcher, nothing else.
Okay, so we might
So
call
if
it
I put that,
might call that entourage in English. I don't know.
yeah, okay, it's pretty much the same. Here we call it staffage. And if I put that, let me say, on the ARCHICAD layer, it immediately becomes visible, you know. So that's the trick. If I put it on staffage, in this case, on here it becomes invisible. So this is a really nice trick to predefine your own graphical style, you know, and it works pretty well. And one thing we also do with these views, when I'm sending out these data to the structural engineer, he will say, oh, please, can you send it me again? I don't want to see the trees. I don't want to see the terrain. I don't want to see the windows. I don't want to see the cladding. I don't want to have a rail. So what we do in this case, we have, beside of our builder plans, we have a so-called raw plan. And the so-called raw plan means that all elements here, we just show the elements which are the elements matter of interest for the structural engineer, and that's pretty nice. And you can do the setup here. This is really easy to do that. You have to filter the element. You have to filter the element, and you have that one down here. Elements in 3D view. You have got the filter and cut elements, and you see I'm excluding here for this view the windows, the doors, the curtain walls, and the zones. So I just get my walls. The second thing what I do is I see just core only and not the entire model. If I go to entire model, I have back my cladding and my insulation. So it's just the core only. And of course, I have got a dedicated layer combination for this raw plan. And of course, I have got a model view for the raw plan. And the nice thing is then you can start to play around. You can say, okay, let's see exterior or interior elements. You can make a graphic override and you can say, okay, let's check if I have all elements which I need for a thermic calculation. Or you can say, for instance, I want to see all elements which are out of wood, just to clear out which elements are the wooden elements. And then you can get straight out of here and you can say save as and use IFC file and yeah, and check the calculator, and you will be able to communicate perfectly with your structural engineer, with the MEP engineer, and so on and so on. So that's the way how we organize it. Probably one last word for the pen sets, because they are absolutely important if you want to show the elements. You see, that's like our standard wants to see that. That's an insulation, that's wood, that's air, that's cladding, and but that's not the way I want to see it in my design plan. In my design plan, I want to see it much more abstract, like this. And we solve that with a pen set. This is our pen set, and this is our Austrian standard pen set, and this is a really easy one. The only thing what we have got is pen 1 to pen 8. It's like the rotring pens, from very thin, it's going thicker and thicker. And then we have reserved pens for GDL objects and the background and the foreground. And the second one is very interesting. That one is determined by the Austrian standards, because here you will find all the building materials. This is the color for brick, this is the color for concrete, the second one, and so on. So any of the building materials have got a dedicated color. And if you change that one, let me say for design, you see I made them black. And so that's one way how you can, if you use the real building materials, you can apply a different pen set on it, and it looks pretty nice. And you can play the game also for the building application. It's like this, and you can play the same game for the builder plans. They look a bit like that, and so on and so on. Whew! I was talking more than an hour.
Yeah, no, you've been doing fantastically. I think this is a great glimpse at how you think, and of course, how ARCHICAD's power is, so useful in so many different ways. So we have some questions. I've been answering questions as we've gone along as best I can. I'll just pass along some comments first, and then some questions. So, by the way, stoppage is wireframe, so it's not entourage, it's wireframe. Thank you, Powell, Flett or Fiat. Comment about the graphic overrides being so powerful, it would make sense to have a training on this. I know we're going to be talking a little bit about some things coming up this next year, and we might have a specialized either one session on graphic overrides or possibly a little mini series on that. Perhaps Andreas and Tim and I can cooperate on that. Richard Matthews says, do you ever sleep, Andreas?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So folder names in the view map, this is something just going over, I know it's there in German, but in terms of the organization, you have a view for modeling or a group of views for modeling, one for building plans, one for client, etc. So just go over that from at the high level.
Yeah, one is for modeling here. This is standard in my template. One is for the preliminary design and design. One is for the building application. One is for the builder plans in color. One is for the raw plan where just the essential, the load-bearing elements are visible. And there are some examples for 3D views. And here is my folder for all those listings and scheduling. And this is one for visualization, an extra one. And here is, we started already with the plans for the electrician. So, okay. And it's going up and up.
And then within each one of the, say, modeling and building application and client, you have clone folders for story sections and elevations that have just different styles for each one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to change the style, it's quite easy. Let me say we are not happy with the style for the design. You just drag the folder and you keep the which button is it? It's the Alt on the Mac, and I assume it's the Command on the PC. And I made me a copy completely, you see, with any structure in here. And now I can say, okay, I don't want to have for all of them in the settings. I don't want to have 1 to 200. I want to have it 1 to 100. Work is done. That goes so quick, If you have organized the whole thing in these subfolders, you can just copy them by dragging and keeping one key pressed just to make a copy, and then you change. That's it.
Awesome. Let's see. Geraldo asks, is that solid wood walls on concrete foundation?
Yep.
Okay.
This is down here is concrete. Let me go down to the. This is very common here. So, and on the basement, it's concrete with XPS, and on side as thermal insulation. Inside, I have very, very primitive. This is just a stud addition. It's yeah, and yeah, on top we have this KLH, we call it, or CLT. This is cross laminated timber, what we use here. we love it because we are in the Alps, and you see it have even here. It's a 300-year-old lodge. We have got wooden walls, and yeah, this is nice and cozy in winter.
All right, let's see. Okay, Scott asked, will the recording be available for download? I've been taken away for business. Yeah, generally with the ARCHICAD user presentations like this, I make it available for everyone for the following month. And then after that, it's put into our library, and supporting members, if you sign up for a monthly supporting membership of Silver, then you get access to those plus downloads. In this case, there's been a request, Andreas, whether you can provide a file as a BIMX. Like, would you be able to provide this file as a BIMX?
Yeah,
okay,
I will do that.
And you know, perhaps I'm going to ask you to consider whether you can share this or another file as a PLN. Just you know, and of course, maybe take the time, and maybe I pay you for time or something like that, just to change the names, you know, to English, right? Because it's going to take some time. So think about that if you you know, think people would find it very useful to study some of the ways that you do
No problem.
things.
You can have that one.
Okay, excellent. So comments, this is fantastic. You know, just a lot of, you know, great positive comments. Do you use the renovation filters? I don't think you've been doing anything in these projects with it, but I know you do renovations.
Yes, I heavily use those renovation filters because we are obliged. We are absolutely obliged to see them, and we have got those states. There's the 00, which means there's no filter. 01 means just the existing element, which means the site, of course. And then we have the demolition. We don't have one here. Then we have existing elements after demolition. And then we have a so-called plan which all elements which are new are red, all existing are gray, and the demolished one are in yellow, and that's by law. And then we have the one for the builders, and the builders will see all the new elements like they are. But if there is one element which is going to be demolished, let's check that. Let's say, come on, this wall, or let's say this wall is going to be demolished. Just let me call out my renovation palette. Here we go. So let's put that on demolished. So it will show up in yellow. So yeah, that's easy.
Okay.
So we are obliged to do that.
So let's see. I think we're pretty much through with the questions. One last one. How do you organize your layers?
Again, I'm just working with the layers I get. This is the more or less, these are the layers from the Austrian standard, because I'm tired to set up all the time a new layer structure. So I take, every time when I get a new ARCHICAD, I take the Austrian standards, I take the layers, and I just add a few ones. And when I'm adding a few ones, I do that with the attribute manager. But the most important thing are not the layers. The most important thing are the layer combinations, to be honest. This is much more important than layers. But in this case, the Austrian layers are organized. They are divided in some 0, which means this is axis or supporting construction or mass model. And then we have the so-called vertical elements like walls, horizontal elements. We have got roof elements. We have got stairs, ramps, lift, and so we have got the furniture, we have got exterior, we have got MEP, we have got volumes and anything you need for the zone stamps. We have the so-called documentation, and we have got just the dimensioning, and that's it. So I live with them. But the most interesting thing are those guys. Keep those guys simple, keep them the one is for working and drafting, the one is for the design, the one is for the design in the section, because they are usually different. Example, the furniture you don't want to see in the section because it makes the section absolutely flickering. And the one is for the building application, the one is for the builder's plan, One is a raw plan and one is for the 3D model. And it's easy to keep them up to date. Whenever you import a layer and whenever you create a new layer, just go through this list and say it should be visible here, here not, here, or whatever. And the work is done. So it's easy.
So you mentioned raw plan.
Raw plan is that one. It's I don't know the English term. Sorry, this is a word by word translation. I think I missed it absolutely. Raw is in our case, I just want to see the load bearing elements.
Structural plan?
Yeah, structural plan. Thank you. That's
okay.
it.
Okay, cool. Renato says, please ask apologies from Brazil to Andreas for the 3-0 defeat against Austria. Okay, so.
You deserved it. It was a brilliant game. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun. We have all of these people from all over the world attending. It's awesome. Dave says, as you work a lot in Austria, do you use the ARCHICAD terrain tool often, or ARCHICAD terrain tool? I'm not sure if that's a misspelling or if there's ARCHICAD. Is there a terrain tool?
Yeah, to be honest, I do not use it. It's very nice. It's part of the German-Austrian package. You have a subscription here and you get provided with really nice objects. But to be honest, most of the time, in former days, I was using Architerra, which is a very, very nice program coming from ggraph. And these days, I'm doing most of the terrain importing with the help of Rhino.
Okay, so we're going to make a transition and bring Tim back on the line. We're going to move on to the next section. But before that, one last thing. Can you show us your schedules, door or window schedules?
Wow. Door window schedules. To be honest, in this plan, I'm not that far.
Okay.
Let me think. Is there a plan where I can do it?
Eric,
I don't have one evident. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
I should have prepared that. I have to apologize.
And I can actually do that very easily. I've got a file open that has a window schedule, if that helps.
Okay. All right. The window jam details look bespoke. Can you advise how they were done in principle only? So you're creating custom jams?
Oh, they depend. Look at that. They are not that principle. This is I would say this is 1 to 50, how we think.
So are they from the standard library parts just by setting certain things?
All of them are coming from the standard library. This is one thing I really try. I work as far as I can with the standard library, and because it makes life much easier. Just in case of emergency, I'm doing something different. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I believe that we have set aside a few minutes right now to talk a little bit about ARCHICAD 22, just briefly to talk about what we're seeing, and then we're going to transition to a review of some things from the Masters of ARCHICAD 27 course this past year, some of the things that people wanted a little extra review of, or that we're going to just, highlight. Excuse me. So in terms of 22, I know, Andreas, you've had a chance to look at it. You have a copy. Have you been actually working with it on any projects yet?
No, I just today got my copy of ARCHICAD 22, and I was working a little bit with the beta version because I could contribute a few things to the Austrian standard settings. And what I really loved on 22 is that, and that's really, I have to say thank you Graphisoft for that, and I have to say thank you Graphisoft for this steady development of ARCHICAD. You are not jumping around like some other people, you are going steady straight ahead. And the nicest thing is, if we had to learn the brand new stair tool and the rail tool this year. We got used to these hierarchic structured tools, and the really nice thing is we have got a brand new curtain wall tool which is almost as flexible as the stair tool is. It's fantastic. I just tried to work with that, and the nice thing is in the opposites, the old curtain wall tool, which just provided us with a few frame types, and it was a bit clumsy to set it up. The new one is fantastic, because guess what happened? They are using, of course, the complex profiles, so we can use any form for creating our curtain wall. And the second thing, the whole pattern creating is very, very flexible, so you will be able to create out of the box really crazy forms and patterns. Yeah, I love it, to be honest.
So that's gonna for I think that anyone who does commercial design projects where curtain walls are sort of a natural part of the vocabulary, it's just going to be easier, and you're going to be able to go further, more detail, and play around with design more flexibly to experiment. What I think probably I want to see separate from that is we've used the curtain wall tool for some unorthodox things, occasionally for ceiling grids or for furniture, or things like that. And you demonstrated in the Masters of ARCHICAD course some use for conceptual design, where you are basically sketching the shape of the building using the curtain wall tool, because you can literally just change the outline of things in an elevation or in a 3D view. So it'll be interesting to see how the new features also allow it to extend. What about the speed? One of the issues with curtain walls with complex stuff was that it was a little bit slow, but in this case, have they improved that as well?
What I've seen generally is that happens, I think, since ARCHICAD 16 or 17, that with any new release, the average speed is getting better and better. And the same thing happened in 22. So there's another thing, it's very responsive. If you are working with it, it feels very smooth. And to be honest, I like to sit on 22 and work with it. It's absolutely worth.
Okay. Can you do me a favor, Andreas, and just bring up the Graphisoft website with 22, just so that we have something on screen that's sort of related to it, because we'll talk for another 5 or 10 minutes about some things, and be nice to have at least something visual there. So Tim, what are you excited about for ARCHICAD 22, that you've seen?
Well, I'm certainly keen to see what they've done with the data handling, because I use that a huge amount. Hopefully that'll, allow me to do a lot more things. And I think you and I have talked about, being quite interested in this idea of using the calculation aspect, because that potentially opens up the possibility for doing basic formula. So, for instance, you could start to create cost plans automatically from areas and meter run things that you've actually mapped from the IFC functions to one of your properties. And that's really pretty interesting. At the very least, you could actually take a zone schedule and put some costs against it, so much per square meter, depending on the type of zone, and get a really rough, very, very early cost plan, just doing something like that. So that's going to be interesting to see what you can do with it. What I often find is that, you get this new stuff through, and Graphisoft have actually come at it from one angle, and often you look at it from a different point of view and you think, well, actually, we can use that for lots of other things. And that's where, if you look back at where we went with the railing tool, Andreas and I have used the railing tool for probably more things that aren't railings than are railings. You know, so I use the railing tool for drainage runs, for instance. And I don't think anybody
those are really good.
about that. So, you know, and Andreas has used it for all sorts of other things like roadways and things like that. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see what abuse we can do to the curtain wall tool. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Eric, about doing things like ceilings using the curtain wall tool. You know, so there's all sorts of things that we might be able to do given the increased flexibility there. And the other thing I'm going to be interested to see what they've done with is the new complex profile tool, because my whole 3D detailing approach to projects is built around complex profiles. And so if I've got more flexibility, more things I can do with complex profiles, then that's going to be great, and looking forward to that. I haven't had time to do any beta testing now for a couple of years. I've just not had the time. So I haven't even seen it yet, apart from what you guys have also seen probably on the videos.
Right.
So yeah, and the UK version always comes out quite late. I was talking to the guys at Graphisoft UK just the other day, and they've just sent it back because they managed to break the first version within about a day. So it had to be sent back to Hungary to fix a few issues. So, you know, we'll probably get it. Last year, I think I didn't get it till the end of July. And there were a few bugs even then, but I generally start using it as soon as I can, just to suit the project. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, so you brought up the quantity takeoff, the calculation formulas. I'm particularly interested in that because we've had over the years, and maybe increasingly in recent times, requests for how do you do quantity takeoffs and pricing, costing estimates. And the answer has always been interactive schedules can go up to a certain point. They're very useful, but they're limited. If you want to get multiply things by a cost, in other words, so many dollars or pounds or euros per square something or another, then you know, you can't really get that easily in the tools that we've had up to this point. Now it's going to be much easier to do those sort of calculations directly using what I believe is something very similar to an Excel format, you know, where you're essentially writing an algebraic formula and referencing certain other components to put it together. So because it's now going to be much more straightforward, but still it's a complex area. I mean, there's a reason why people are professional quantity surveyors, and you know, construction companies have specialists for doing their cost estimates and things like that. It's going to take some time to evaluate and figure out how to use it, but it's my intention to create a course this year, probably starting in September or October. So in other words, not right at the beginning, because it takes a little time to absorb. And I'm definitely going to spearhead that course. We'll have other specialists. I mean, possibly Tim and Andreas will be a part of this, but also some other people I know who have done a lot of work with quantities. So that'll be one of the things I'm excited to be able to bring to ARCHICAD users, would be, you know, how to take the new tools and apply them, you know, in the working practice. Which brings up, I guess, just some of our ideas for Masters of ARCHICAD presentations coming up. And so I wanted to just lay out a few ideas, and Andreas and Tim, your comments on it as well, so that all of you who are interested in continuing to develop your skills know what we're going to be offering. And also we'd like to get your suggestions. So in other words, things that you'd love to see, things that you say, God, I wish I knew how to do X better. You know, that'll help us to determine, you know, which ones get done now versus later, or, you know, to see whether there's interest. So the quantities is one thing. Of course, ARCHICAD 22, there's going to be a variety of things to learn in addition to curtain walls and some, you know, use of the formulas. I'm sure there'll be other things just to get our heads around. So I always do an upgrade training. Usually run that in July, August timeframe. So I'll announce details about probably in a couple of weeks. So if you're interested in just getting an overview of the most important things that you need to know when you migrate projects, when you are considering your workflow, I'll be covering that. The quantity takeoff class, the more detailed one, definitely is on my agenda. Now, we've talked about, Andreas and Tim and I have talked about some more smaller courses. In other words, like the Masters of ARCHICAD 2017, which we're going to share some highlights from shortly, was a marathon. It went from July of last year till May of this year, so 10, 11 months. It really was an advanced best practices course, covering a very, very wide range of practice. However, that was a huge investment of our time, a huge investment of people who were members. And I've gotten many comments from people saying, I watched a bunch of them, but I've gotten busy and I'm planning on watching more of them later, which is fine. But we're going to start doing some more specialized things. So Andreas, you were talking about doing collaboration. Maybe you can just share a little bit about what this might look like. Tim, I know you were talking about some things on data handling and on the, what do you call it, the complex profiles. So Andreas,
Yeah.
what do you think the one for collaboration might include if people are interested?
I found out that through my teaching jobs that many people are really good in ARCHICAD. They're really good in modeling, and they can handle the program, and they can set up their models, and they can make their own architecture with it. But if you look how they are communicating with the planning partners, and it starts from the client and it ends up with the structural engineer, they spend so much time and they are getting so busy keeping up these communication between those guys. And I would say you have seen my last project, and you have seen how different situation I have set up within one file, and that goes even further. I'm setting up in the same way the communication channels between my client, which usually is going to be provided with a BIMX file, or sometimes if he's very old-fashioned, he's getting his PDF, so the print even, and also setting up the communication with the structural engineer, with the MEP engineer, with the electrician engineer. And the interesting thing is how you compare what you get back. This is one thing. There are different techniques where you can find out where is the difference from structural engineer's plan version A and version 2. And of course you can make then clash detection, and there are other techniques to compare two different versions of things coming in, because this is always the problem. The bigger the project is, the more time you spend to define what you are giving out, and the main problem is checking what you are getting in, and all of these things are covered with our communication tool. It has to do also with teamwork, because in my opinion, the BIM server or even the BIM cloud is going to take over a serious role in this game in the future. I expect more and more systems, and based on IFC, being implemented directly, and you do that already by hotlink modules, and so you can set up. It's like a game, you know. But you, as an architect, you are defining the rules, and I would say this is what we are doing in this course.
Okay, so collaboration is certainly a course that I'm interested in having Andreas run, and I'll be helping, and Tim might be involved. Can you, those of you who are on the call right now, can you just put some message in the chat if you're interested in that? I'd like to see whether we have 2 or 3 people, or whether we have 25 people who all say, yes, want to do it. So go ahead and do that if you're interested. Tim, tell us about what you see might make sense to share for, data and for complex profiles. What do you think would be good to teach that hasn't been taught separately?
Well, to be honest, I'm not really sure until I actually get to grips with 22, because we've already dealt with the idea of data and complex profiles and everything to do with that as part of the advanced course that we did, and I'm not sure that there's I mean, I can always rerun that kind of thing if there's a demand for it, but I think most people would be able to look back at that and actually pick up what they need from it. But it's really about saying, as we take each release forward, and Andreas there saying about the fact that Graphisoft is moving the whole thing towards, more and more collaboration and IFC, and the fact that you can share the information you put into your model with other people is absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that I think we only really touched on, but Andreas was dealing with earlier in terms of things like the level of detail that you might want to send to a structural engineer. And of course, you can define the level of detail using the core, other, and finish elements actually within your complex profiles. So that way you could actually create a complex profile where it had all the information showing in one view, because you want to explain, for instance, the whole build-up of say, a complicated wall construction. But actually, when it comes to sending the same information to the structural engineer, you only want to send them the core. And I've already been working quite a lot with that to show things like three-dimensional detailing, where you just want to show, for instance, blockwork and brickwork, but you don't want to show finishes and insulation and all the rest of it, because you're talking to a bricklayer who doesn't want to know about anything else. So, there's a lot of complexity built in that actually means that you can do pretty amazing things with complex profiles. I mean, I've been working with them now for years, and I'm still developing concepts and ideas. So we can always take that forward.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that you haven't mentioned, Eric, which I think would be fascinating, which we kicked around as an idea the other day, is actually an idea of actually looking at files that people actually send in to us and running a kind of health check on them. Now, of course, you've got to be brave to send us a file. We might tear it apart and say it's completely rubbish, but we do it in a very constructive way, and it could be very interesting for other people to look at it and just say, well, let's go through some pretty basic information, a bit like when you take your car in every year. I know it's probably the same anywhere in the world. It's certainly in the UK. When you've got a car that's more than 3 years old, it has to go and have all the basics checked independently every year to make sure it's safe. It's like a sort of test, or a bit like doing, a doctor's health check. So something like that. And if there was an appetite for that, we could maybe, in an hour session, we could probably look at 3 files, just literally open them up and say, well, what have we got? What are the good things? What are the things that might be able to be improved? Are there any problems? If you open it up and your errors start, showing up, then, it might be, possible to actually solve those. So I think all of that sort of thing would be interesting to see whether people thought that was a good idea.
Mm-hmm. So I think Andy Travers writes, that's a fab idea, Tim. I think that was from your comment just now about that.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's something that I'm interested in exploring, and we have to determine the format and the frequency, but possibly once a month we might have an hour-long session and take 2 or 3 projects and just sort of give them a going over comments and things like that. That's at least one possibility. So I'll just read off a couple of things. There's definitely people interested in energy modeling and eco-designer star. And one question I have for the two of you is, do you know anyone who's actually using these routinely? Because my sort of informal survey asking, I found that it wasn't widely used. And in part it was because it just didn't deliver what Graphisoft was hoping, you know, like something that an architect could use to get useful design feedback to optimize a design for energy. Nor was it giving the detailed reports that a specialist required. So it was neither good for the architect for design, nor good enough for the specialist. Now that may be out of date, that may be incorrect. Either of you heard much about it?
To be honest, I like it because it's implemented into ARCHICAD. But the problem here is we have got regulations here and standards here, and it doesn't fulfill them. So for us, it's a bit an extra work without any benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, well, I think it's the same. I actually do know a guy who has worked a lot with passive house stuff in the UK. He did, I think it was the first passive house school here in the UK, and he's got quite frustrated because, you know, some of the I mean, a lot of that is actually at the end of the day going to be about how easy it is to get the data out of an ARCHICAD model and into a system that will actually do a passive house analysis. And the answer is, at the moment, it's not easy. And of course, that is where everybody wants to go, is really all about saying everything we do needs to be, you know, shareable. And that's a big, important thing to look forward to. And Andreas is right as well in that, you know, if you look at it from Graphisoft's point of view, there are goodness knows how many different standards across the world for energy performance and the way you calculate it. I mean, one of the stupid things about the system in the UK we have is that the energy ratings in the UK are all based on Manchester, which is in the middle of the country. If you actually look at Scotland, it's much colder and therefore the conditions are different. You look at the southeast of England where I am, it's much warmer, but the ratings don't take account of those variables, where passive house does. Passive houses are probably the best in international standard, and maybe that's something that would be worth looking at, because passive house is, you know, it's recognized certainly across Europe. I don't know about the States, but certainly it's recognized in Europe as being, you know, the gold standard, and very much accepted by for local building regulations. So maybe that's the answer, Eric, to look at some sort of interaction with the passive house system, because that's probably going to be more useful to people than anything else.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to keep my eye out, and if anyone has any information, anyone who's watching now or at the recording, is if you know people who are using EcoDesigner in ARCHICAD effectively, you know, as a routine part of their work, you know, let me know who you know, connect me, because I'd like to at least interview and find out briefly, you know, what they're using it for and how well it's performing, and then potentially enlist their help in making some sort of training. But for right now, I'm going to say that this is not going to be this year. I think the quantity takeoffs and the collaboration things are probably ones that are more within reach. You know, like we have the expertise, we have the tools that, you know, can work. So one thing that related to the collaboration, Andreas, comment about just working with Revit files. Let's see, where is it? where is it here? Interoperability between ARCHICAD and Revit is a must here in the Midwest US because the majority of other offices use Revit. I'm not sure that I can even garner consulting work because I cannot show smooth translation in the file transfer without some level of headaches. I know that you mentioned working with consultants, and many of them would be working with Revit, structural or MEP. I guess that would just be a natural part of the collaboration series or whatever the presentations.
Yeah, this is a main topic, because what we have got here is that month by month offices are switching from Revit to ARCHICAD, and one of the jobs these days is to teach them how to bring 30 levels into 3 stories, and how to take a model from Revit and to bring it into ARCHICAD. And it's possible. It's not that heavy. The only thing is that we have got these BIM standards here, and they define clearly. They have a clear defined story definition, but unfortunately, Revit users usually don't keep that. Tim, we had a talk today or yesterday about that. For a 3-story building, you can end up, when you try to import a Revit model, with 30 so-called levels, which become stories in ARCHICAD. You know, so you have to know how to handle that, and it's easier than you would know.
Mm-hmm.
So would expect. Sorry.
All right. So that'll certainly, yeah. So we'll certainly be, you know, as we work on that collaboration training series, and we don't have a time estimate for it, but I think that there are definitely a lot of people on here who said, yes, I would love to, you know, to be involved in that, or to learn from that training course on that. So Andreas, consider that confirmed in terms of market research, you know, that there's interest. And I know, Tim, we're going to be doing, we talked about maybe the idea of doing some teaser short presentations on particular topics to see if people would be interested in a longer presentation, or possibly a mini series of 2 or 3 classes on it. So,
yes.
you know, so we'll definitely do that. And the health check, there were a bunch of people who said, oh, that sounds awesome. Don't know that I want to be the first one to put my project up for review.
Yes, we need volunteers.
Right.
Yes, that would be
right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I do see some comments from people about eco-designer, like Sergio Rodriguez used to be an eco-designer trainer, works at a university, and comment about eco-designer in the US having some limitations. And then Alan Gillard, architects in Cardiff, are doing some sustainable design with eco-designer. So thank you so much for the references. I'll reach out to those people just
Alan?
so that.
Is Alan here?
No. Dennis wrote that Alan Gillard, architects in Cardiff, is
I
doing.
know Alan. Yeah, I know him.
Okay, so
Yeah,
then you can introduce me, Andreas. And okay. So what are we doing next? I think Tim, let's make you presenter, because you have the outline of what we were planning on doing today. I know we've taken more time on this first part, but that's fine, because really, Andreas, what you did was total treat in terms of just showing your file, and it's exactly what ARCHICAD user presentations have been. Is let's talk about your work, and then look at your file and all the, you know, really smart ways that you've got it organized. So it's been fantastic. So I'm going to make Tim presenter, so we'll be able to see your screen. And Tim, let's take a look. We've gone 2 hours. We plan to do it for 3, so we have another hour to go over some things. And let's just do a quick decision about what would be the most interesting to do in a short snippet. I have a feeling that terrain model creating contours might take too long to really explain that. But I know that is part of the Masters of ARCHICAD 2017 program. So those of you who are signed up for that, you can review that from, less than 2 or 3. And by the way, for those of you who might want to learn more from the 3 of us by participating in the Masters of ARCHICAD 2017 program, just getting access to it, I'm going to be changing the pricing on it for the next little while to half price. So in other words, you can get it for $347 instead of $697, just as a way of celebrating the conclusion of the course to make it more available to people, because I think now we know what it is because we've done it, and we've gotten some great comments and reviews from people. So I will be sharing a link to that later. Favorites, I think this is something that, Andreas, you have your sort of preferred method, and Tim certainly has his. That I think would be very useful to spend a little time, because it's pretty quick to demonstrate.
To be honest, it's now not even 5 hours for getting up again. We are a bit late. Favorites, I use them exactly in the way like they should be used in ARCHICAD on the tool. So that's it. I filter them.
All right.
But is it possible for me to say thank you? And
yes, absolutely. So Andreas, thank you. We've gotten so many great comments for about your work. So I'll pass along more of them later, so you can have that satisfaction. But thank you. You did a great job. So Tim, you and I will go on for a little while longer. And Andreas, get a good night's sleep, or for 5 hours of sleep before you have to get up in the morning.
Short one, anyway. That's okay.
All right, take care.
I got used to it. Bye.
All right, so Tim, I think your way of using favorites is a very interesting one that we did share in the 2017 course, but I think it's for those people who aren't in that course or aren't going to be part of it, I think it's a very useful way to look at it. And frankly, the hot link from separate story, we did do that in the Tracy Stone one there. So I'm going to suggest that you then jump from favorites to the elevation presentation and focus on creating, attractive rendered elevations and different options for elevations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's what we'll do for the next 45 minutes or something like that, and finish up with some more, maybe some final questions before the end of our 3-hour thing. So Tim, you can move on to your favorites and then the elevations.
Okay, so let's I've got about 4 projects open, but I can show you 1 or 2 things here. Obviously, everybody knows that if you hit the favorites button up here, you actually get a list of favorites, and you can arrange these in lots of different ways. They'll obviously list in alphabetical or alphanumeric order. You can create folders, and all of that is great. And I think if you're actually working on projects where you just don't change your favorites much, you may be working on projects that are very standardized and you just want to do the same thing day after day after day. That works fine. It doesn't work for me. And the reason it doesn't work for me is because I am constantly creating new things. I just do such varied work and such varied designs that I'm constantly just creating a new thing. And that could be an object, it could be a wall type, it could be a complex profile for the edge of a roof, it could be anything really. So what I do is I still use the normal favorite system, but mainly for basic stuff like setting up text, drawing titles, an elevation type, that kind of thing. And that's all in my standard template. And frankly, that isn't going to change really. That really is the kind of thing I probably update once a year. Because of course, although you can import and export from your favorites, it's really quite hard to integrate favorites into other projects and then to remember to update. And if you add a whole load of favorites into your one project, actually reusing those in another project is quite hard work. Believe me, I've done it. So I don't use that system for doing that at all. What I do is I actually create a favorites file here. And if I can just get rid of that bit there, you can see my favorites file. This is my view map, and I've got a whole load of folders here which hold different things. And if I open up each of the folder, if I actually take one, say, substructure folder, I've got 2 plan views and I've got 2 schedules. So say, for instance, I wanted to draw some new drainage for a project. There's my drainage below ground. I open that, and there I've got various things. And if we look at those, they're pre-drawn in 3D and they're set up. If we take one of the interesting ones like that one there, that's actually a complex profile of a French drain. And so that has got a drain pipe in the middle. It's got a bit of airspace in the middle. It's got some fill around the pipe itself, and then above it's got just soil. And you'll see that the vertical stretch there and there are actually in the soil element, which means I can stretch this up and down without changing that at all. And that's actually created as a beam, which means it's very easy to just not only to draw it, but actually you can put it to a fall. And you'll see actually that the fall is probably pre-drawn, yeah, to 1 degree. And you'll see that it's already on the correct layer. But most importantly, you'll see under properties, it's actually already preset with the right ID, with the right specification data, which is something that all goes into my specification system. And I can check that by going into the drainage specification area here. And I can say, there's my French drain. And if I want to change that, I can change it, but I change it in the favorites file. So if I suddenly decide that actually I've missed a bit of important information, I'm actually putting it in here, which is in my central file that I use for all future jobs. I'm not just doing it in that individual project. And when I then want to say, sorry, I clicked the wrong one. I want to use that, I just literally copy it, flip into this project, and I find the groundworks proposed, paste it in, goes over there. I put it wherever it is, and I can either edit it, or I can just eyedrop it like that and start drawing. But you'll see that all of those have then, they've gone in, it's on the right layer, it's got the right ID reference, which is the way I work, it's got all of this information is correct. So therefore, that automatically then appears in my specification list, which on this particular job looks like that one. And so I can then go into the groundworks drawing, which is that. And that's updating because I've been working on this today. And you'll see that there's my drawing list, and there is the specification for all of the things that the builder needs to know to do with the groundworks. And if I then want to create something, so I did this earlier. There's a funny sort of duct here, which is actually to do with the downdraft extract in the kitchen, you know, I basically created that, but I created it in the favorites file. So that's what you do. So when you come along and you draw something new, I mean, I've been doing something here where I've actually created a ceiling thing. Where's it gone? I think it was, there we go. Just going to move it onto the right layout. There. I've been using this, which is actually just a way of drawing a ceiling hatch. You know, something pretty boring that we have to put in lots of different jobs. If you actually look at it, it's in fact it's the grid element, but it's only got one element in it, and I can drop that into a ceiling, and it will actually here, I can allocate it. Right, so okay, I'm going to make that ceilings. There we go. I happen to have actually got that from down there, so I can call it that. I can then put that in. There's a whole load of odd stuff here because this is from an old file. Oops. Editing in this bit here isn't that easy, and that's why it's really faster to actually do this. And you go in there and we can just change those, and somewhere down here I've actually got this ceiling thing that I've just put in. Where's it gone? There we go. There. So I look at that and I can think, I want to, my separator is that. Happy with that. So I go back. Of course, it's all integrated, so this is just a label that is going to pick that up, and I can then drop that into this one. I can say, let's go to my ceiling plan. And I think, where am I going to put the ceiling thing? I might do it inside, just inside one of the bedrooms, like that. And I'm going to pick the slab that is there and that together. And we can move that down. So it just shows in the ceiling. I can then do a cut that in so it looks fine. I can actually then, oops, come on. Right. Let me drag it out. There we go. It shows. I don't need to do it any more than that. I could play about and actually cut a real hole and all the rest of it. But the main thing is I've got that in there. And if I then want to make a note of that, I can then pick that up, putting it on the ceiling text, and it's all there. And if we actually looked at, I haven't actually created my ceilings list, but if we looked in the ceiling specification list, it would all be there as well. So you can see that actually there, and what I've done is that's something I created. I then save that, and then I've only drawn it once. I've specified it once. Everything is then there, anything I need, and you can see there's all sorts of useful things that you get in here. You start to get to, I mean, all stuff like the steelwork. There's a whole load of stuff here, different sizes of steels that I use all the time. So that there is, you know, these are all the standard ARCHICAD steels, but basically that one under properties, I've got the fact it's on the right layer for a start. It's the right coloring because it's got, you know, primed, you know, a sort of primed steel color. It's a load bearing element. It's new. The trade name is structure. I've actually given it the drawing note there, so it's a quick way for the builder to see what that is. And there's a bit here about the specification, but if you want to edit the specification, you go into this one here. And of course, what this is doing is it's actually, if you look at it as a schedule, I'm saying to it, I want to see everything that actually has got that trade name, and I then want you to, ARCHICAD, to list the ID, the drawing note, and the specification, and that's all it does. And then when you want to combine that into one document, then you would go into this job here, and under the specification here, we've got the whole specification. Just take a short while for it to do. You can see it doesn't take that long to regen. Now this is a big, this is a huge list. This is a list of every single thing in the project, all ready to go.
And this particular project that we're getting the list refreshed is what size project? Or do we have can maybe just take a 3D view of the project just so we can see the scope of this particular one?
Yeah. Let's see. And of course, all the data that you see, all of the benefit of the favorites actually goes through to the BIMX file as well. This is about sort of 90% ready for tendering at the moment.
Okay.
So, you know, the idea is that you look at it, you know, because when you're designing stuff like this, I mean, you know, there's all sorts of things that are always new. But the idea is that you don't just draw it in here. You draw it in your other favorites file, whatever you need, and then you reuse it over and over again. You know, you look at something, you know, a blockwork partition. I mean, that doesn't really change that much, but I do sometimes change it. But, you know, I can just copy a blockwork partition into the file, and then everything to do with that block partition gets dropped in. So yeah, even down to these are actually little 2D, these 2D only, but they're objects, therefore you can attach data to them, and so you can, you know, drop those in where you need into a project as you need.
Can you show us just the data for one of those 2D ones?
Yeah. So it looks exactly the same. So
it just schedules at the top of the of that particular group of elements.
Yeah, I mean, that there you go for masonry. It will list everything to do with this is the whole of all the masonry stuff. So if you decide to go in and actually say, okay, I'm going to change the way I do certain things. You know, recently I introduced, you know, a few different types of lintels. I'd always used one particular brand. I'm now thinking, well, actually, there's another brand which just seems to do a better design. It seems to be easier. you know, then I can add that in, and then once it's in there, you know, that lintel there, where are those? If I take that one. That you've got a lintel and the whole plaster soffit and everything all in there, and you know, that's all got data attached to it. So you're telling the builder all the time what you've got. But of course, if you open that as a complex profile, that's what you've got. And to be honest, if you're detailing, then you know, you've got to draw that in. That's just 2D fills. It's just 2D fills that are extruded in one direction. That's all that composite profiles are. There's nothing magic about them. But you know, you can get it right so that you've actually got, you know, ARCHICAD won't do a plaster soffit yet on Windows. I've been complaining about it for more than 10 years. So you have to put your own in. You know, little details like a bit of sealant on the outside, or you know, a sort of fill between the window frame and the plaster. You know, what you really draw, that bit there, is actually the lintel.
So
and you'll see as well, I mentioned about the different elements, because actually, let's just check. Yeah, see, a lot of that is core, but that bit is finish. I mean, you could, yeah, that bit's finish. You could argue that that should be finish actually as well. If we look at that and click here, at the moment we've got the tile model. If we do core only, you see it turns off. So if you want to send something to a structural engineer, you could, I mean, you could even argue that the elements I've got left in there actually shouldn't be core, they should be something else, in which case you could turn those off as well. But if you're disciplined about the way that you do them, you then have the ability just to show only the information you want and nothing else.
So, Tim, I think you've demonstrated amply just the power of thinking in an organized fashion, having a file with components that you're designing with that include specification data, and the ease that you can just copy and paste things in, and then they just show up in the schedules as well as, of course, in the model. So a couple of questions related to sharing files. Andy Travers asks, I think somewhat facetiously, how much for your favorite file? You know, so, but there are some questions from people. This would be a great project to open up and see how Tim works. So, you know, to whatever extent you're willing or able to share, we can make that possible. So you have any instant answer, like no way, or you'll consider it, or you'll make a version of that's sort of got part of it? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look at a particular project. I mean, frankly, my favorite file is years of work. I mean, it's almost beyond price for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this just gives you a little bit of an example. This is just a little part of a sort of standardized building that you can see what actually is there. You know, that is your foundation. That is a complex profile, which is all the stuff below ground. That is a complex profile of the wall, including all the damp-proof course and everything. You know, that's a fairly standard composite floor thing. So, you know, but it's useful. You know, it's useful to be able to have all that ready. And some of this is also about me saying, well, how am I going to do it? You know, working out what I do. How do I do that? I don't know how much I've actually got in there. So yeah, it's hard to know quite how to explain it other than to just say the general principles are there.
Yeah, no, I understand. So we'll talk. I know at various points you've shared BIMX files, and there may be some, and I know we shared some things in the Masters of ARCHICAD course, some excerpt files as well. So
Yeah.
just we'll talk a little further about possible ways to help ARCHICAD users without Tim feeling he's giving away the store. So
Well,
let's
let's
see.
move on to the elevation stuff,
Yeah,
because
let's
one of
move
the
on.
things,
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, we're going back to basics here.
Mm-hmm.
We can all take a model. I mean, this is a model of an extension to a care home in the UK. It's actually not that architecturally exciting, mainly because the first one we showed to the planners they thought was out of character. So you end up having to make it a bit boring. But you can see it's quite well modeled. We've got all of the textures, the windows are detailed correctly and all the rest of it. And so one of the things that you do is to say, well, what can we do in terms of elevations? So the first thing is to look at a really simple black and white elevation. And there's some little kind of things that are useful to do. The first thing you can do is you can click on that elevation, and you can use this thing here to say select elevation marker on the home story and zoom to it. So let's do that. Turn the layer on, and that immediately gives you the location and how far it's going. So it gives you an idea, and you think, okay, well, if I actually want to change that, then you can. But at the moment, what that's doing is that it's basically presenting everything from that elevation cut line into the drawing, so to speak, looking away from you, but all of the same line weights. And you can see stuff like this here. If we look at the axonometric again, you've actually got quite a lot of stuff, and this stuff here at the back, when you're actually looking at elevation, you want to try and knock that back. So the first thing we can do is let's select we select it on the story, and we open the thing here, and the interesting bits are down here under model display. This is where you want to start looking for things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down, and you see this thing here called mark distant area. If we tick that, what we're doing is to say anything that is beyond the mark distant area, which is a line that will show up in a moment, is all going to be grey, and that's a much paler color, so it's going to recede into the background. So click OK, and you'll see immediately it's actually given you here a line that you can move it. And so you think, okay, well, I'm going to move down here. I want the main part. I know my building, so I know the main part of the building. I've got a stair tower here sticking out, and I think, well, do I want to show that as part of the main part of the elevation or not? No, let's make that in the background. So I position that there. And then if we go back, what's happened is all this here has gone grey. And of course, you've got quite a lot of control over that, so you can pick the grey. But the idea is that everything just shows the same color. And we all used to do that when we all drew with pencils and pens years ago. Well, I guess some of you guys probably never did that, but I certainly did when I was a lot younger. And so you would always do the stuff at the back, in a sketchier way. But at the moment, we've got no color and we've got no shadows. So again, if we actually go, you can open the settings from just by right-clicking on it and going to elevation settings. And again, you look down here at this model display element, and the next thing you can do is turn on shadows. So if we put sun shadows there, that then gives you an extra bit of information here. And we think, well, what shall we do? Let's actually try it at, 25% gray, and turn that on. Not a lot's happened. Just make sure I haven't got.
You may have a graphic override.
Yeah, I think it is.
What's your sun position?
Well, the sun, yeah, sorry, I should have dealt with that. The sun position here.
Yeah, that's standard.
Is, there's this general consensus. It's 45 degrees up, off to one side and 45 degrees up in the air, which gives you, it's probably the fact that this isn't dark enough. I was trying to be clever and not show too much. Let's get that. I had this sorted earlier. I apologize for this.
What about your pen set?
No, that's right. Printing is the right pen set. Oh, I know it must have sun shadow in there. Yeah, odd, isn't it?
Yeah, fill uncut surfaces with nothing. That might be the issue.
Oh, that might be. I was trying to do something. Yeah, okay. I may have done it the wrong way around because I want to sort of build it up bit by bit. So let's ignore that for the moment. I think I'd actually got that as design elevation there, which just turns this ground line black, that's all. We've got no color on at the moment. So the way we turn the color on is actually, again, you go back to elevation settings, down into model display, and you're looking here at this uncut elements. And what we can do there is we can actually pick, the one I find the best is actually own surface colors non-shaded. And let's not, yes, and we're going to turn on vectoral hatching. I generally leave transparency off because it can look very odd with elevations if you start seeing other things through the windows. And all of a sudden there, you've actually got, and our shadows have arrived, Eric.
Yeah, because it was because you were filling it with nothing, so it didn't have any surface to.
Exactly. And actually it's going slightly the wrong way. So we would probably want to change that. So the azimuth, let's try 135. No, I turned it around the wrong way.
Maybe minus 45.
I think it's minus 45 we want. Let's try that. And it just shows you how you can experiment with these things. There we go. So we're getting quite a nice shadow there. It's not quite strong enough, I don't think, that shadow. So again, you could play around with these things and you can say, let's actually go, that's 50%, let's go to 75. There, that looks a bit nicer. So that's starting to give you a lot more definition. Now you'll see the other interesting thing is if you're looking closer to these things, these vectoral hatches aren't perhaps what you would think. By the way, at the moment, the windows are shown on, and there's no need for that. We can actually say we can change that to a design drawing, they disappear. This thing down here, this is actually the model view combinations that turns on and off things. And they're found up here under model view options. And what you'll find is you've got doors and windows here that, oh gosh, you can edit various options to do with what shows and what doesn't show. But what I'm doing there is I'm actually saying I've got model view combination, which is a design drawing, and I've got that one which is a working drawing, and the working drawing one shows the openings, which you don't, I don't want probably on a design drawing. And those, you can save all of those, and then you've got access to them here, and they save with the model, so that your model view options is there. These vectoral hatches then are actually to do with the material, sorry, the surfaces. So that's a brick element there. So if we look at that, oh, excuse me. You notice the naming of all our services is different, but that's, just the way I work. So here we've got masonry brick, open that up. And of course, what it's going to look like if you rendered it is shown up here. This is just actually part of the basic engine. But when it comes to this kind of elevation, you're actually going to see whatever you've got set as the vectoral hatching. So what I've done is I've actually, first of all, I've created a hatch, which I've called a brick elevation sketchy. And if we go really, you can see that I've created that, where you just draw what you fancy and then save it as a new film. And I've just created something where you just get a slightly discontinuous line. So the first thing I've done is I've created my own hatch pattern that looks like that. There. What you're actually then going to see is the color of that brick is actually determined by this surface color here, and you can adjust this up and down. It's hard to get something that looks absolutely right, especially with bricks, because they're of course very variable. A brick isn't a solid color. It's actually usually, or especially the ones we use here in England, it's very varied. So you have to sort of pick something that looks about right in the terracotta range. But then the other thing you can do is you can change it so that instead of using the element pen, you can use your own pen. And what I've done, I've actually created a few extra colors. I tend to put a whole load of extra colors down the bottom bit here. And I've got a color here which is a light brown. And you can see that what that is doing then is giving you the idea of a mortar joint, which is like a sort of fairly white lime-based mortar. Whereas if we changed it, you can make a dramatic difference to the way the brick looks. If we go for a dark brown, let's change the whole thing. And if you change it again to say black, completely different. In fact, you have it on black and it starts to look a bit unsubtle, really, which is why, you know, that what I've done is always felt that you know, idea. Sometimes I even use a white on there, so it gives you that feel of a nicer brick.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I could go in here and amend the pen there so that all of those soldier courses there actually change from black to white as well. But I quite like the emphasis that gives on there. This one here is actually a stack brick, and I've deliberately made that a different color because that's what I'm going to do. The coping at the top there is actually, you see, is actually white because that's a stone. This, by the way, here, we go into that window, the masonry arch, the brick surface here is a special one called brick soldier lintel, because if you just use ordinary brickwork, you'll get all of the vectoral fills will actually go sideways. It just looks completely wrong. So in fact, if you look at that, you'll see that there's actually a soldier lintel one, and that's the same brick color or similar brick color, but the vectoral hatching is just background fill, nothing else. So you don't get any coursing showing because the coursing is already drawn in by the way that ARCHICAD has done it. The other thing which I do is I play around with the window colors, which is glass as a surface. So if we find glass over here, clear glass, and take that color, you know, you can take it, well, I mean, for instance, you could do the whole thing so it's just a nice pale blue. Actually, it would look a bit odd, that. It's a bit predictable. And of course, windows never look like that. You know, you may think they reflect the sky, but they don't really. But again, if you're working in a certain part of the world, you know, that might be more relevant. But what you generally do is take it and say, well, actually, let's make it a dark gray.
So I'll point out here that there are different ways that ARCHICAD represents a surface, and in the elevation view, it's going to be using shading. In a 3D view of the building, it's going to be using the texture map, if there is one, or the shading with some other effects, such as, you know, how reflective it is on the surface or how transparent. But here, it's just purely the color. And so by changing the pen, you're actually affecting, you know, just in terms of the rendered elevation. You've got to realize that it's a different control. So
you can see that you start to then get an elevation where there's, you know, a little bit more interest. You're just adding a little bit of interest, but at the same time, it's a very technical drawing. And of course, when you're presenting in certain ways, you know, that's what you need. But of course, you don't have to use the elevation tool. This is the same elevation actually set up as an OpenGL view. This is actually a perspective view. And if we look here at the top at the 3D projection settings, you can see that what I've done is actually used this one here called the side view. And that means that you definitely get a precise head-on view. You can, of course, change it. I mean, you start changing all of these bits here, you can do that. And as well as that, that shows you there, that's where the camera is. So that's where you actually, that's where the camera is positioned in order to get that view. But at the same time, you've got the sun here, which of course you can move. And I've positioned that so it gives me the same sort of shadow casting. And at the moment, we haven't got shadow casting on there. Because I haven't turned it on, but you can start to build that up. What you're not getting though with this view is the idea of actually having less detail for the distant stuff. You can see all of this is then very solid, and that's quite hard to handle, to be honest. So it's not entirely satisfactory, but it's a different approach. You can also convert this to a 3D document. This 3D document at the moment has just got shadows and everything else on. If we actually go to the 3D document settings, we can actually say we're going to fill them here, which is these look exactly the same as. So you're starting, you could use a 3D document as well. You're getting it looks very similar. If I just grab that, so I've got the same. Looks very similar, but you'll see with the elevation that you've got the added element of this here. And once you start going into rendering, you can actually also do something like this, where I've just created a sketch rendering like that. So, okay, it's a bit fuzzy. I've used sketch rendering because I didn't want to spend the time doing a full-on rendering, but it may not take that long actually. If we pick one of the, I just wanted to show that creative imaging. If we pick one of the standard fast ones, which is all we need for the moment. There we go. Outdoor daylight fast, let's just pick that one. That should be okay. Hopefully that's picked that up. There we go. So, and of course you can play around with these by adding in your rendering. You can make the distant things. Where is it, Eric? When you actually put fog in for the distance, it's quite hard to get right, but you could do that.
Yeah, I haven't worked with it for a while, so I couldn't instantly point to it, but it would be a setting in your photo rendering settings dialog, and in one of the settings,
getting the distance for the distance setting for the fog right, I always find quite hard to judge, but it's something that you can do. So if we then said, let's actually, sorry, no, I don't want that as a picture. Let's pick up settings for that. And it should then. So here I've got the view settings, but the interesting bit down here is in the 3D. So what I'm now going to do is to just show you how you might use this as as a way of actually presenting a scaled elevation. So if we set this up now to say, instead of generating a 3D window, let's generate it in the photo window. And then what we'll do, let's put a new layout in. And we'll just drag in our conventional elevation. And you'll see why I'm going to do this in a moment. Oops. Drag that to there, drag that to there. So we get it on the sheet, you know, something like that.
Looks like you designed the building to fit the sheet.
Yep, absolutely. So what we're now going to do is drag that one in, which is the rendering. So I've set it off, and because I've told it to render within the photo rendering bit, you get that. And of course, this isn't to scale, but if we do that, if you're doing a design presentation, maybe it doesn't need to be absolutely accurate. You know, we can say, let's do there, and then we can use, I think we can use the resize. Here we go. So let's pick that there. Start again, I'd hit it too early. To there. And we're going to pick a point that we know. So that point there. There. Do that. That way, you know, your elevation is pretty much to scale. You can get rid of that one then. Drag that to there, and that to there. Now, ARCHICAD won't read the scale on that because it's a render. So you'd have to actually put the scale in manually. But what that will do now is when you change your building, that updates automatically. And in fact, one of the things that's worth doing, because otherwise you could end up with a huge amount of regen times, is that if you actually go in here and you'll see under the drawing selection settings, you can pick the update type as manual instead of auto. That way, you can do any changes that you want to make, and you then decide when you've done all the changes, and you may do several of them. Right, I'm now going to see what it's like. So you pick that there, and then actually you can just do update, and then it will actually regen the whole photo rendering. But it will do it live with the model. So you can actually do photo rendered elevations that can look very cool. I mean, I've only done a quick and dirty thing here. I wouldn't present this, you know, there's work to do on it, but you can see the potential, you know, for doing that. So really you can go through, just to run through again, you know, we've gone through from, you know, basic elevation to the idea of using OpenGL, maybe 3D documents could be useful in certain circumstances, right through to doing our, you know, elevation render, which is what we're doing there, which actually we don't need to do that.
So
So there we go.
Yeah, excellent set of options that you've described. Don't leave this file out quite yet. Oh, I
I'm
guess
just,
you're just closing
I'm
up some of the rendering windows.
all the rendering windows that are open. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, fire away. I'm
Yeah.
happy to answer any questions. I've got a few
So,
minutes left.
You showed the basic approach of let's change the settings of this elevation window to have a different style. Let's change, the settings of different windows to do that. There is an
Yeah.
option that I don't think you showed. Of course, I was typing answers to things, so I may have missed it. And that is using graphic overrides on top of one of, let's say, your south elevation, traditional elevation view. So if
Yeah.
you were to bring up that south elevation view, the actual normal one,
Yeah.
so now you've got it rendered with shadows and the textures. So if you go to graphic overrides, you
Well, I've
can,
actually got, for instance, I've got a graphic override in here, which is elevation with no color.
okay. So yeah, let's just explore a few of those briefly. So let's just say, what is the no color doing? And
Yeah.
because I think that that's a very powerful thing. And the reason why it's so powerful, in addition to just, hey, I can at any time I can change, is that you can have one view that's defined for your presentation sheets
Yeah.
and another view that's defined for your construction document sheet, but it's actually the same viewpoint. It's actually the same elevation. It's not even two different elevation markers. We used to have to create a separate elevation marker to say, this one we're going to do with shading, and that one we're going to do without shading. Now we can have one and just override it.
Yeah. So on this particular one, of my normal design elevation, I've got all cut fills as solid, and I don't want any zone fills showing it. I'm not sure why they would, but I probably don't need that on, to be honest. But all cut fills as solid gives me that the site mesh that I've used here is, because without the override, the site mesh is actually a fill pattern, which is what I want to show when I'm drawing, a more detailed section through later on. So all I'm doing there is to say I'm going to change that design elevation, that changes that whole thing to black, but I'm not changing any of the material settings to do that. And then when I actually want to do, say, you might say, well, you do an elevation like this, which is at one scale, but you're doing something smaller and you want to really cut down on the amount of information, you can just cut out all the color like that. So you can use graphic overrides very creatively. The other thing I experimented with graphic overrides was actually using overriding so that you use real rendering. I mean, one of the things that I'm not sure I got it.
Yeah. One of the people typed that in, Przemysław Niz from, it said that he changes the fill to a bitmap fill by material name when he wants to have a more natural look, but you have to set it for each material that you want to use. So I assume that if you have 10 different materials you're using on the exterior of your building or some number like that, you'd actually have to create an override rule for each one of them saying when this is, matches this particular one, use this override.
I've experimented with that, and it works quite well, but it's not very subtle. Most of the time, frankly, I actually use this kind of approach, and I just accept that it's an architectural technical drawing. If I wanted to do something which was more of a sketch, using a sketch engine, I'd probably be, doing a different view of it. I might be, changing it so that you see it from there or something of that sort. I wouldn't necessarily do that with the an elevation. But the rendering option, you know, is worth thinking about, because it really, once you've set it up, it doesn't take that much time to do.
Right.
You know, you can set the whole thing up at the beginning of the project, and of course you can overlay things. One of the tricks that you can do is that you can actually overlay one render over another if you're clever with the way you do your setup. So for instance, you could actually bring in a photograph of a background, and you actually drop that in to the back there, and you know, you can actually start to play around with having transparent backgrounds and all that. There's lots of things you can do, but the main thing I do is just normally it's either a simple one like I've just shown you, or a rendered one like that. And the rendering I find is quite good as long as you can actually drop these back, because without doing that, it all looks too flat. It just doesn't read properly.
Right. So I think your idea of possibly having two different renderings that you overlay, one in one style and one in another style, you know, a little bit of extra work, but the nice thing about it is, in addition to communicating, you know, better, it really, once you set it up once, then if the building design changes, you just re-render and they'll still come up. So the two renderings that are stacked will sort of update independently and show what they should.
The one thing I don't favor, Eric, is taking stuff out into Photoshop and bringing it back in, because as soon as you do that, there's no live connection. Right. And you really want to be able to set the thing up so that because you know what you've then created as drawings is accurate. Whereas once you take it out and you've forgotten you've moved a window or something like that, and it's an old photoshopped image, it's just not accurate. So
yeah. So we are at the 3-hour mark. So we've filled out our time, and I think with a lot of wonderful things.
That was easier we thought.
Yeah. I'll just call it the final question that we're going to take today from Sarah Patterson. Just your comments on how do you get the balance right with presenting something to clients in the conceptual phase that looks great but isn't a huge time investment because it's still conceptual.
Yeah, and that's where I think looking at getting the sketch render right, you know, that's you know, an interesting idea, and there, let's get rid of that one. This idea of saying here, you know, we can actually play around with, where is it, creative imaging, these. You've got quite a lot that you can play around with here. You know.
So I think, as with anything, when you decide that it's something you want to optimize, like, hey, I'd like to have a few different options to show clients with the sketch. So you play around with this until you get something you go, I like the way this one feels. Or just get familiar with the 3D styles that now are so easy to just invoke. All right, well, we're just going to turn it into a white model with some shadows, you know, things like that. And then the tricks, you know, things like what Andreas showed earlier, where even in the very early block modeling, you know, stacking and blocking and just sort of simplified shapes, instead of even trying to show it like brickwork or whatever, just show it like it's a tabletop model. I thought that was brilliant, because if people look at it and it looks like a tabletop model, they're thinking about it differently than if it looks like it's a modeled CAD, you know, design.
Yeah. The other thing which I've have experimented with and not ever got quite right is the idea of actually using 3D documents where I think it should be possible with a 3D document to change. There's the way, isn't there, Eric, where you can actually change the line type, or there used to be. Maybe that's not in 3D docs. There's something else where, you know, there's a way that you can actually make the lines, you can override with the lines. I suppose you could do that with a graphic override as well. You could put a new one in, say, sketchy. I never tried this. Element type is, you know, all types. No, I'm not sure I know how to do it.
Well, just change the line type. Just say element type, all types, line type.
Oh, there we go. Line type, and I don't know whether I've actually got a sketchy. Let's use break just to make it.
Yeah.
Look. And then make up a new combination, and we're going to add sketchy to it. Because I have I don't know why it isn't in this project, but I've actually got a sketchy.
Ah, yeah, there you go. I mean, it's obviously you'd want to tweak it a bit, but you are
Actually do everything. It's interesting. It hasn't changed that line. It's
so it's for the edges of elements as opposed to
yeah.
So yeah.
So you could sort of play around with that idea of actually making wobbly lines.
Yeah. Awesome.
Years ago, they used to, you know, you could buy add-ons for AutoCAD that did that, you know, and you'd be playing around with these things.
Yeah. But, so Ryan asks that it says that sketch renderer seems to be different in 2017. Do you know why? So in 2017, I'm assuming maybe in ARCHICAD 21. Have you noticed the sketch render noticeably different than before?
Not really. The sketch rendering engine, I don't think it's changed for years. It basically it is worth playing around with it. But the key bit you want to do is when if you go into photo rendering settings here, and you play, I mean, goodness knows why anybody would want something drawn in lime green. I don't know what our Graphisoft were on when they gave us that as a standard one, but you know, you can play around with whatever. I did one earlier called Elevation. But the nice thing here is that if you go into here we go, select and manage scenes, you can pick one that you like and you can export it, because that means then, and you can import. So basically you can create your scenes that you want, and you can then export them, put them in your template, and next time you start the project, you've got those. Or indeed you can export them, you know, and drop them into your file here, which is, I've got all my ARCHICAD stuff in here, ARCHICAD templates, I've got settings, you know, I've already got an interior rendering scene, and I can save that in there, and that way I can easily import it, you know, from other projects into other, yeah.
Excellent, awesome. All right, so we're going to finish up. Some comments, reading off. Constantino says, "You people are awesome. Thank you very much for your time." And John Dunham, "I'll have to watch some of this again whenever you upload it. Aloha, guys." Dean, hey, Dean from Hawaii. Thanks for impressive bunch of info and insights into how the real deal does it. So lots of thanks from Sarah and Andrew, Susan, Michael, Lewis. Lewis says, I still use an old sketch line from years past, still works. And have you ever made your own lines for the sketch engine? It's something like Photoshop. Interesting. Okay, I don't know. I haven't done it. Okay, so just a lot of great comments there. So in addition to just thanking you, Tim, and thanking all of you for staying to the end. If you were here for all 3 hours, that's great. If you came in the middle, then when we post the recording, you'll be able to catch it. What's coming up? Well, the monthly series of ARCHICAD User. I don't have announced who's going to be next month, but I will be working that out. We'll have another interesting expert sharing his work. I will be doing the ARCHICAD 22 upgrade training, probably starting early July. So look for an announcement on that. If you're interested in enrolling or purchasing access to the Masters of ARCHICAD 2017 course, where you get all three of us going on about the best practices methods for an entire project. Although we didn't do everything within that project, we focused it around one fairly complex project from concept through working drawings. Then look for an email and posting on the Masters of ARCHICAD site, because I'll be offering it for half price for a little while as a promotion and a celebration. If you have ideas for courses that you want, then drop a line to support@bobrow.com. We certainly have a few things laid out for let's say the rest of this year. Be sort of finalizing, or let's say making some more firm decisions about things in the next couple of weeks and announcing them. But I think there's always so much to learn, so much to share, and so much to celebrate, frankly, about the work that we do and the tools that we work with. So Tim, thank you again. What are you showing here? What do we got here?
I was just doing stuff in the background so that people didn't get bored. It's just different views set up.
Is that stonework? Is that a custom fill, or what is that?
I don't know where I stole that from. But yeah, I got this is actually a bit of a slow model at the moment because I imported a SketchUp file from the Kitchen Designer, and it's a bit huge. But yeah, I mean, I use 3D a lot just so that I can actually look and see what
Yeah. So one question that I answered for you was just, does putting in the extra effort modeling help with the construction process? And I just basically said, yeah, you always said that it reduces errors, it simplifies, the communication. You just basically don't have to explain things nearly as much because they're much clearer what they have to do.
I think the thing that has changed my life with ARCHICAD is BIMX, because if I can persuade it's almost got to the point now where it's almost worth me buying an iPad for the contractor and saying, here it is, here this is all the information you need for the whole project on an iPad. That is just tremendous when that happens. It's sometimes they're a bit, oh well, we haven't used iPads, and I just say, well, iPads are expensive, and I think you're spending several £100,000 on a house, and they say, oh, an iPad's expensive, and you think, no, it just doesn't make sense, to be able to show things like this and show them to clients just lap it up. They love it. Anyway.
Yeah. All right.
I'd also like to thank you, Eric, because you've shown a great deal of faith in doing all this stuff, especially this very large, thing that we've done for over a year. And you've sort of kept Andreas and I on the right track, so to speak. And occasionally, let's actually try and you know, explain it in words that, you know, more or less experienced users can actually understand. So thank you for putting it all together, and you know, having the commitment to keeping going all this time.
Well, thank you, Tim. It means a lot to hear that from you. So yeah, we got some more more great comments, and iPads are low cost now, under $400. Yeah, so that's true. That you know, obviously technology costs certainly are not a big deal like well, anyway, they've improved for what you can get for a certain price. Printing costs tons. I bet you can prove out the benefit with a simple printing cost analysis. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I agree. I mean, I regularly spend, you know, to send tenders out for projects, it can be £1,000 to get all the printing done.
yeah,
Because
yeah. So great.
You know, so, yeah.
All right. So Tim, I'll talk to you separately about what we can share, you know, from, I'll talk to you and Andreas, what we can share from today's presentation. In other words, what file stuff can be made available, but we will be sharing at least some BIMX stuff and possibly some ARCHICAD native files of some variety. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Tim. And we'll finish up. I'm just gonna do one more copy of the comments because it's always so much fun to look at them afterward here.
Yeah.
So we'll be
That's
back.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, the stonework there. Is that actually a fill? Or
yeah, I stole it from somewhere. I mean, that's the thing, you know, you just keep your eye out for things. And if you like the look of it, you steal it. You know, it's just what have I got? I mean, I've got things here like I've got masonry fills. I've started to do image fills like that. Tiles. We could spend all night doing this. And that is paving random stone. There we go. Yeah. I mean, the key thing is that it needs to match. So, you know, that has got to match that, etc., etc. And that's really the main thing.
all right. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody. we'll call it a day or a night. And thanks for joining us.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Thanks
take care.
a lot. Bye.
Bye.